It is a great delight to interact with you in this class. Relax and enjoy the class. This is a courtroom. In a courtroom, who determines the guilty person? I know you will say the judge. Now, who decides the punishment given to the guilty person? The judge also. There are also different types of judgment the Bible teaches us about. Today, we're going to be looking at the two types of judgment in the Bible. Our topic today is the final judgment. Can we say it together? The final judgment. And the objectives of this lesson are: number one, distinguish between the judgment seat of Christ and the great white throne of judgment. Number two, evaluate what happened at the judgment seat of Christ. Number three, highlight at least three types of crowns and the reasons for getting the crowns. Just like everyone look up to the reward or award he or she will get at the end of every academic session, so also God has a reward for everyone after our lives here on earth. But this reward is in two categories: the good reward and the bad reward. Let's look at this beautiful illustration of the judgment seat of Christ in this picture. See the judgment seat and see the believer at the staircase. Now 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 10 says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad." The main focus of the judgment seat of Christ is God rewarding believers according to their faithfulness in following Jesus. I take it again. The main focus of the judgment seat of Christ is God rewarding believers according to their faithfulness in following Jesus. Now let's see what will happen at the judgment seat of Christ. Number one, all Christians or believers will appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Number two, they will be rewarded according to what they have done here on earth. Number three, those that do good will receive good reward, and those that do bad will receive bad reward. Then number four, the types of work that we receive good rewards are the ones done with a pure motive to glorify God out of obedience instead of out of trying to impress others. So the judgment seat of Christ is judgment for believers or Christians. Let's use these Bible passages to answer these questions. Revelation chapter 20 verse 11 to 15. Revelation chapter 20 verse 11 to 15. You can read it. Now the first question says, what is the name of this judgment? In Revelation chapter 20. The name of the judgment is what? Great White Throne Judgment. Now, second question, what books will be opened? Now, there are several books that will be opened, and one of them is the book of life. The book of life. The third question says, what will happen to everyone whose name is not found in the book of life? What will happen to everyone whose name is not found in the book of life? Verse 14 says, or verse 15 says, anyone not found written in the book of life will be cast into the lake of fire. Now, fourth question: what are the two new things that will happen after the great white throne of judgment? The two new things that will happen after the great white throne of judgment, it is found in the book of 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 13. It says that we look for a new heaven and a new earth. There will be a new heaven and a new earth in which righteousness will dwell. There will no longer be wickedness. Now the last question, the fifth question, says, who will live in the new home? Who will live in the new home? The people that will live in new home are those that are found with righteousness, are those that have what? Righteousness. I want us to remember that hell is originally meant for the devil and his agents, and that God so loved us, the world, that he gave his only begotten Son to us, that whosoever will believe in him will not perish, will not be part of the hell. So let's remember God's love and follow and obey God's instructions. Now let's distinguish between the judgment seat of Christ and the great white throne judgment. What is the difference? At the judgment seat of Christ, believers will be rewarded according to what they did on earth. All believers are rewarded at the judgment seat of Christ. But at the white throne judgment is the judgment of all unbelievers will be judged according to what is written in the heavenly books. Unbelievers will be judged according to what is written in the heavenly books. But let's remember the love of Christ for us, that God so loved us, and because of his love, let's stay away from evil and do what pleases God. Let's see the beautiful crowns, some of the beautiful crowns that one will receive at the final judgment. Let's see the first scripture, 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 8. 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 8. What type of crown will believer receive? Crown of righteousness. Now, why will God give the believer crown of righteousness? It says, for loving or longing for Jesus' appearing. For loving or longing for Jesus' appearing. Now from the book of James chapter 1 verse 12. James 1 verse 12. What type of crown will the believer receive? Crown of life. Crown of life. Why? What the reason given is that for enduring temptation. When a believer endures temptation, you get the crown of life. Now in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 2 to 4 or verse 4 says that we will receive what? Crown of glory. Crown of glory. What is the reason given? For leading God's people. For leading God's people. In Revelation chapter 2 verse 10 says that the believer will receive crown of life. Crown of life for what? For being faithful to Jesus unto death.